This is an adaptation of a novel called American Prometheus. Christopher Nolan read this a few years ago and decided, I want to make that movie. I want to make a movie about Robert Oppenheimer, the man responsible, largely responsible for creating the atomic bomb, and also the man behind really the first atomic bomb detonation, which took place in New
Hmm.
Mexico in 1945, the Trinity test, one of the most famous events really in human history. This movie is pretty much shining a spotlight on the events leading up to that very, very fateful day in 1945, and also some of the fallout from that event as well. And so, with all of that out the way, I will pass it over to you. What did you think about Chris Nolan's new film, Oppenheimer?
I have to preface this by saying Christopher Nolan, absolutely and for sure, is one of my favorite filmmakers out here, man. He literally has two of my favorite movies of all time in Inception and The Dark Knight. Those are just two movies that mean something completely different to me. And so I'll always, I think, respect Christopher Nolan as one of the greats and one of the people who we've talked about a little bit at length today, and one of the people who you can tell makes a movie just because he really loves that shit. Like Christopher Nolan really loves fucking movies. Like I know that's crazy, and every director you should be like, oh yeah, every director's like that, but this dude is nuts. Like Christopher Nolan is always trying to do something different. And I think that's just so important, I think, to the growth of any director, but specifically one who has the track record that Christopher Nolan does, man. Oppenheimer specifically is probably the most different movie that Christopher Nolan has made outside of this movie to me after watching it feels like the outlier to a lot of his other films. I think in the way just in which the way the story is, it's very very grounded. It's not as dreamy. It's not as I'm in this different kind of world, right? Where I'm talking The Prestige is about magic. Memento is about a man who is thinking backwards low key. You know what I'm saying? This is not the Dark Knight movies. This is not Interstellar. We're not in space. This is literally Christopher Nolan saying, I'm about to do a biopic about J. Robert Oppenheimer. and this is the result that you get, man, in this film. First and foremost, I have to talk about the technical stuff first with this movie. I have to. I just have to. People who listen to the podcast know I love the technicals. This movie is absolutely nuts when it comes to technical achievement. This isn't another Christopher. This isn't Dunkirk. I haven't even seen Dunkirk. I'm sure there's a lot of good war and things in Dunkirk though. But this isn't Dunkirk. This isn't Dark Knight. This isn't big bombastic energy and explosions and adventure per se and in action. This is legit a biopic about a man and these other characters maneuvering through this world in history as we know it. Everything in this movie has happened. It is in history books. It is in the book that you just said that Christopher Nolan also read. All of these things have happened, and so it is so different from anything he has made. And but with that being said, to be able to take his technical prowess and I think inject it in a film like this is so impressive. This movie looks so good, and you can tell all of the work and energy that is being put into this film. I remember reading something. What was it? I read something that potentially they almost never used any visual effects in the movie. I almost what? First of all, there's no way that's completely true.
Allegedly, they use no VFX in the movie.
Allegedly, they don't use any VFX, but I do believe it's probably less than Christopher Nolan would normally use
For
in a lot
sure.
of his other films. Like for cleanup, you gotta use a little visual effects for cleanup. There's like no way, bro. Like you gotta. There's always something somewhere. It's like, oh, we gotta clean it up a little bit. But if outside cleanup, they're pretty serious about that. That's impressive still, regardless from a technical state. I mean, you gotta clap. Like y'all really killed it. The editing. Oh my God. Who's the editor? I need to know. The editing in this film. I know a lot of people listening to this is not going to get it, bro. Editing in this movie is nuts. To be able to convey the emotions of Oppenheimer, the ways in which it's cut so seamlessly and smooth. There are moments where the a scene is about to end and it cuts to another scene, and you're like, huh, I'm okay with this because it feels good and it feels organic and it feels like it's supposed to be happening. And again, I have to go back. The way they put us in the mind of Oppenheimer, who's thinking about physics on another level, or he's homesick, or whether he's thinking about space in some crazy way, and the vacuums of space and galaxies and the way stars fall and explode. And oh my God, the editing I think is nuts. It's some of the best editing I think I've seen in a movie for real. And I was like, yeah, this we're gonna be talking about this for a while. The music, oh my God, it might be. It might not even be a mic. I think this is the best score of the year. I don't know who's going to top it. It could be Dune later. I don't know. But as far as we've gone so far in the movies to this point, I think it's my favorite score of the year so far. It's just really well done. It's so good. There are moments where it's leading up to the bomb explosion and the music is changing with it. Like it's very Christopher Nolan thing, right? We know him and music is a thing, but it's just so good, man. It's so well crafted and it's just absolutely sensational. On to the actors. Cillian Murphy. Yes. Yes. This is very clearly his movie. There are other people in the movie, other actors I'll talk about in a second, but even more importantly, it is very obvious that this is his movie, right? Of course, he's the titular character. Of course, we know that, but it's different. It's the way he's acting with his eyes. It's the way he has to go through these different character moments with Florence Pugh's character or Emily Blunt's character, and he's made to be, I don't know, just this person, man. This is a movie of really straight dialogue and character moments and in political things happening, and you coming into the psyche of what it's like to be part of Project Manhattan or whatever it's called. It is, but to be able to carry that weight, to be able to be on this IMAX camera, and for me to believe you 100%, 1,000% through the entire course of the film, to me think you're a completely different person is impressive, man. And I think that, just as I was talking about, I think Margot Robbie in the sense, Cillian Murphy has kind of been in the same thing where he has been not necessarily, yeah, he has been just an actor that has gone under the radar somehow and underrated, but it's because he had never been given that blockbuster opportunity for people to be like, oh shit, Cillian Murphy is it. This is it. This is also it for him. He's also done it. He's also put the stamp for us to say, yes, this is Cillian Murphy. And so I'm just really excited for him too, and what this is going to follow for. I mean, he did it, bro. Cillian Murphy did it, and I'm really excited for him for sure. I also have to talk about Robert Downey Jr., who, well, man, this is like a. I know a couple of other people were talking about this, but this is like a, oh, you're done being Iron Man now. Come have fun in the artsy world and kick it. Oh man, Robert Downey Jr. We'll talk about this in a sec, but the nigga's getting the nomination. I don't care what nobody says. He is exceptional in this movie, man. He really is. To be honest, he's had to play that same character of Iron Man for so long that you do kind of get lost in some of what he can do, because he's so much like Iron Man. He is nothing like this character that he is playing in this movie, and that definitely makes a difference, man. And Christopher Nolan is very clearly saying in this movie too, because Robert Downey Jr.'s character does get a whole different part of the film later on. Like he does get a whole section to himself, I think in the third act. But to say that this character is important and to give him the screen time that he gets in this film, for Robert Downey Jr. to act the way he's acting here and in molding to his environment, oh my God, it's just he's doing great work, and I think everything that he added to the film as well, and he didn't take for any, really, for me, he didn't take away anything from what Cillian Murphy had going on. In fact, he only enhanced it in a lot of different ways between this like rivalry that they have going on in the film. And so I absolutely think Robert Downey Jr. is another example of what the greatness I think that he brought to this film, man. I'll add one more thing before I get off my soapbox, but this movie, man, Oppenheimer, is it's going to reward multiple viewings for sure. It's going to reward multiple viewings. That's not even a question for me. My very small nitpick is I think the movie hit a peak at some point within like, so the movie's 3 hours. I think it hit a peak some point within like the 2 hours somewhere. And then it did more. The more wasn't bad. I just felt like, damn, we did this thing. Now the rest of the movie felt like a cool down, I guess, right? Like you're working out, say, and then they're like, oh, here's the cool down. The cool down in boxing is bullshit, by the way. Like the cool down in boxing is like you're still doing ab workouts. You know what I'm saying? Like you're still getting your ass kicked. And I think that's how Oppenheimer feels to me, where like I did peak at some point, and the rest of the film is still really good. It's just I can feel the steam being let out in that third act for me in particular. But I think again, and I think that's what I mean by rewards multiple viewings. I might have a different sense of what that means later on. Once I've seen the movie again. That being said, there is another thing about the film where there are certain points of the film I feel like you're going to be confused. I think that's just the way and how the dialogue is spoken and how the story is being wrapped up. I think it's just, it is what it is. You're going to be lost a couple times. Not a lot, but you're going to be lost a couple times. Not only that, but dang, I had another point. What was I going to say? Oh, I think that being wrapped up in this film it's impressive for it to be 3 hours and to feel the way it feels. It's impressive. I don't know how he got it done, but it's something I think it could be the technical achievement standpoint where you're literally looking at Robert Downey Jr. give a monologue for, you know what I'm saying? Like there's just a lot of good things being done here. I think that puts you in this world of Oppenheimer, man, that I really enjoy. There are moments in the movie. This is what I was trying to say. There are moments in the movie that I feel like Christopher Nolan has a stance or a reason why something's ingested into the movie that's made to feel important. Me as an audience member, sometimes I just couldn't figure out why this thing was as important, why this sideline story or this character had a certain motivation to do this thing, or this character over here was doing this. Sometimes I didn't always get or understand that. And part of me wishes I read the book to be like, oh, this is what Christopher Nolan is trying to say. So there's some of those small things I wish he conveyed better to make me say, oh, that's why we're spending time talking about this thing or this person. Outside of that, this movie's fucking phenomenal. Thank you again, Christopher Nolan. This is by and large, I think, one of the better movies that he has made. I think it's an achievement across the board, acting, technical, directing. He just did it. And I'm happy. I'm happy to be a Christopher Nolan fan, but I think he set out to achieve, or I think what he set out to achieve, I think he accomplished that. And I think that's important. And I think Oppenheimer is going to be another one that I think people are going to talk about for a while, because to be able to do the things that he did in this film without being a big blockbuster, with it being just a dialogue driven movie is definitely different. So Oppenheimer, thank you.
So I will be the first to admit that Chris Nolan, for me, for the past 10 years, he's not been it. He's just not been it. For a long time, he was one of my favorite filmmakers. From that stretch between Memento, actually, before that, to Insomnia, all the way through the Dark Knight trilogy and Inception, I was locked the fuck in. I was totally on board. And then he recently went on a stretch post Dark Knight trilogy when he became this massive crossover filmmaker, making movies that just didn't work for me. They just didn't connect for me. I certainly stand back and recognize the brilliance of him as a filmmaker and his singularity in terms of his existence within Hollywood. Nobody does it like him on any sort of level, really. He knows how to take original idea and make it into a blockbuster. Inception makes like over 800 million. Interstellar, an original idea, makes over 700 million. Like nobody can really do that and just bring people to the movies based off of their name alone. That's why earlier I said he himself is kind of an IP. Chris Nolan as a name is a name that gets butts and seats. That being said, even recognizing some of the brilliant aspects of some of his more recent work, and though it doesn't always connect with me, and I'm not a huge fan of movies like Interstellar or Tenet or Dunkirk, they work for me on certain levels, but not entirely. I'm happy to say that this is not the case for Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer is one of the best films of the year. It's one of Christopher Nolan's best movies in his entire filmography. It is absolutely a monumental achievement to take this incredibly dense book and this material that is just astonishingly intimidating because the book is 721 pages, and somehow figure out a way to compartmentalize and extrapolate the most important information and turn it into this 3-hour sprawling epic biopic about one of the most important men who ever lived, examining one of the most important times in history and an event that has had such profound effects on society for the past 75 to 80 years is really just an achievement across the board. And he's probably the only filmmaker that could have pulled it off in the way that he did, because coming into this, when you look at the material and the ambition of the story, it is intimidating. And Chris Nolan, on top of that, as a filmmaker, is not somebody that makes it easy for you as a viewer. He's making you work. He's assuming that audience goers are smart and intelligent, which we are, and we should be treated that way. I will say that in some points and in some times, I think he kind of runs with that and does a little bit too much with it and strains us a little bit further than he has to, whether it comes to sound or the look of things or just his stubbornness in terms of certain filmatic or cinematic techniques, you know, whether it's the use of film or IMAX or just all of the different toys that he uses at his disposal. But I think that this movie, in relation to everything else he's done before this, could not have been possible without all of the work that came before it. He could not have made a movie like Oppenheimer without a success as the Dark Knight trilogy, without what he did and accomplished in Inception, without just the exploration into scientific advancements like he did with Interstellar, without the exploration of World War II like he did with Dunkirk. Everything that he's done up until this point informs the work that he's able to achieve within Oppenheimer. This is truly, I think, the culmination of his life's work as a filmmaker. And when you arrive at Oppenheimer as a movie and you just kind of look and stare at that 3-hour runtime and think that it's daunting, what he's able to do with that runtime is quite phenomenal, because I never felt the runtime. I felt that the pacing was extraordinary. I never felt uninvested or uninterested. For me, everything moved at such a good pace. And that's just a kudos to the editing and the story and the script. And I think that this is the best script that he's ever written, bar none. I don't even think it's close. I think that he absolutely takes his screenwriting abilities to another notch, because this movie is able to weave in so many things. At one point, it's a courtroom drama. Then it becomes a conspiracy thriller. And it's also about a nuclear arms race. And it's about scientific breakthroughs in lecture halls. And there's romantic escapades. It's doing all of these different things simultaneously while still working within that Christopher Nolan formula that we know, when he uses the nonlinear storytelling, when he uses the really fast-paced editing, when he uses some of the lower dialogue that you have to really lean forward and listen to, because that's just the type of filmmaker he is. He's the type that wants you to lean in and wants you to invest, and he wants you to be really, really sharp when you're following in his story. And I think that you pull back from that, from just all the techniques that he employs and just the masterful way that he directs this and writes this. And you look at the fact that he has an incredible ensemble here, giving some of their career best performances across the board. Even outside of the top names that are on the billing, there are so many surprises for people that pop up here. I would encourage you, if you're going to see Oppenheimer, don't look at the IMDb. Don't look at the Wikipedia. Just go in, because you're going to see a lot of recognizable faces. And that's just a testament to the type of filmmaker that he is, because you have people coming in here, people that have won Oscars, who are like, yeah, you know, I'll take 5 minutes of screen time just because I want to work with Chris Nolan. Like, I know that he's that good of a director. And that's incredible to me. And then you look even closer and you go on a more macro, or on a more micro level, and you look at the story here and just how important it is and just everything that he's able to achieve here. Because, man, I was just so riveted by this story, because yes, we all know about the atom bomb and we know about the importance of it and the significance of it, especially later on the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But when you explore the Trinity test and just everything around that event and the insane need for secrecy and the paranoia that existed within the country at the time and the place that we were in and closing in on the war, and really in the final days of that entire conflict, and just how important it was to keep this whole thing under wraps and to not tell anybody because of the fear of spies and intel leaking. And you just get that suspension and that tension that builds over the course of the movie, because this is life or death for millions and millions and millions of people. And this could literally end the biggest war in the history of humanity, and just also alter the course of civilization, because at the same time, while they're having to build this bomb and maintain this level of secrecy, there's also the looming threat that they might end civilization, that this bomb literally might blow up the fucking earth because we don't know the true might of its power. And all of that stuff is conveyed all throughout this script, and it makes you realize how important this whole thing was, especially considering none of us were around back then. None of us lived through those times. And so we have to go off of just the emotional performances and the things that they tell us. And they make this as big of a deal as it needs to feel. And I just love that the way that this movie is framed and paced, because I was sitting there and it called back to so many just moments and thoughts that I had and comparisons, because the framing of this movie and the framework of it feels a lot like Oliver Stone's JFK, with that nonlinear storytelling, with the conspiracy element, with the speeches and the talky element. And it pays so much tribute and homage to that movie, because all of that stuff that happened in the third act, after it crescendos in the second act, really, that's where I was like, oh, this is totally what I'm in for, because we're now pulling back and really examining the prolonged effects of how this really altered the life of J. Robert Oppenheimer. I would encourage people to go watch a documentary that's streaming on the Criterion channel. It's actually streaming for free right now, even if you don't have a subscription, called The Day After Trinity, after the Trinity test, I think. It came out in 1981. It's a great complimentary piece that talks all about the life of Robert Oppenheimer, especially after the atom bomb, and just all the stuff that he had to deal with, because that's why this movie is named that. It's not named American Prometheus because it's not examining necessarily larger implications for this stuff. It touches on that, but it's really about this man's life. It truly is a biopic. And then you look at Robert Downey Jr. and what he brings to the life of Robert Oppenheimer, playing Louis Strauss. That also reminded me of another movie, Amadeus, where you can examine two characters like Mozart and Salieri, who has this underlying jealousy against that person. And I felt like a lot of the movie and a lot of what Chris Nolan was trying to achieve with Robert Downey Jr.'s performance was paying a lot of homage to what Salieri was examining and dealing with in the Amadeus movie, because you have these two people that on the surface feel like they have a kinship with each other. They feel like they have a friendship, but really behind all of that, it's a lot of underlying tension and jealousy. And then at the same time, you get these two powerhouse performances, because you have two people going at it because they see the world differently. And one of them is doing some really conniving, backstabbing stuff behind the other person's back. So it gets super personal while also examining the real high level, larger cautionary tales of nuclear war and the world that we live in today with all of these nuclear weapons at our disposal. And it's just doing so many different things. I think that this is just, again, a monumental achievement across the board, from the acting to the technical achievements to the directing to the script, just to the fact that this movie exists. Who knew that we could make a $100 million biopic? That is crazy to me, that it did this, that it opened the way that it did, that you can tell a movie on this grand of a scale, but it needed to be done. You needed a filmmaker like Chris Nolan, who has those sensibilities, who has that type of talent to be able to take this and make it feel like a blockbuster, even though it's just a 3-hour R-rated drama. It's a talky ass movie. Like, there's nothing but dialogue for 95% of the movie, and maybe three explosions. And one of them is the big explosion. Everything else is just dialogue. So if that's not what you're looking for, then this movie might not be for you. But if you are in for just the story and how this changed a person's life and altered the course of human history and just all those massive implications, man, this movie's doing a lot. It needed to be 3 hours, and it needed to be directed by Chris Nolan, and you needed the particular actors here, because you don't get anybody like Cillian Murphy to give you those facial expressions and to have those piercing blue eyes that he does to really convey all that emotion. Robert Downey Jr., motherfuckers forgot before Iron Man, this is one of the best working actors. He is one of the greats. Like, go watch his other work. Watch the stuff outside of the MCU. Watch Chaplin. Watch The Judge. Watch Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. Like, the man can act, and he reminds people why he is so good. Emily Blunt, incredible job. Florence Pugh, not in a ton, but does a really good job. And then all of the supporting players, Matt Damon, again, proving why he's just so, he can do it all. He can do anything. And coming in and being sort of that antagonistic opposing force. I mean, dude, it's incredible. You talked about the other stuff, the sound, the cinematography, the effects. It's a really, really incredible film. It's one of the best of the year, and it deserves all the praise and the adoration that it's getting, which leads us to our next point and the Oscar chances here. You already talked about some of those things. I think Robert Downey Jr., 100% best supporting actor. It's happening.
It's not a question.
It's not a question. I can't see 5 other performances knocking him out of the running. Like, it's not just going to happen. And he damn near might win. He might win his first career Oscar just based off of the work he did here.
Yes.
You wouldn't really find any argument for me. I know there's a lot of movies coming out, but god
I
damn
don't
it,
care.
he did it.
I don't
I
care.
think we're also going to see Cillian Murphy and Emily Blunt get nominations here for
Hmm.
performances. What else do you think? I mean, do you think it just runs the board? I think Variety published an article saying that it could be in contention for 12 Oscars and it's likely to get nominated for them. You're talking about 3 performances, director, picture, adapted screenplay, all the below the line stuff. Where do you see it falling once we get those nominations come January?
I think all of it. I think it's everything for real and absolutely is going to fall in line. In fact, I can't really think of a category where I'll be like, oh, it's not going to get nominated there. Like literally across the board, sound, hair, makeup. If it don't win editing, I'm so I know we still have a lot of movies to see.
The editing is
But
crazy.
if this movie doesn't win best editing, I'm sending a letter to the Academy because we can't have that. We can't have that. This is one of the best edited things I've ever seen. And sometimes once you see something that it's once in a lifetime, right? Like you just know like nothing else is going to beat it. And that's really how I feel about the editing of this film for sure. That's how I feel about the music too. But man, I can't wait. I really can't wait to see these nominations when they come out because I really think they're going to be nuts. Again, I'm hella projecting here, but I'm really excited for Dune. And these are like 2 of my favorite directors, Christopher Nolan and Denis Villeneuve. I really want to see them go like hella fucking head to head with these technical achievements because Denis gonna also pull out some editing and some music and some. It's gonna be nuts at the Oscars this year. That's all I know, man. That is all I know. But I'm really excited for Oppenheimer, and I really think they're going to clean up. Yeah, they're going to clean up.
Yeah, let's see if Dune comes out this year with this whole strike thing. But if it does, to your point, that's going to be a hell of a showdown between those 2 movies because these are 2 of the just apex filmmakers working at the height of their powers, doing it better than really anybody else on a grand scale, taking these important stories, especially in the case of Oppenheimer, taking a really important human story and lacing it with a ton of humanity and thought and emotion while still being able to pull off some unique technical achievements here. I think at this point, it is a shoe-in for best editing. I do anticipate Robert Downey Jr. is going to get that best supporting actor nomination and win. And I also think fucking Ludwig Göransson is going to win his 2nd Academy Award for this score. He already won for Black Panther. He's going to come back and win for another one. This guy is on a different level. The Black Panther and Black Panther Wakanda Forever scores. The Mandalorian. I don't know anybody else doing it like him. He's already entering into the conversation of being one of the greats. And there's a few obviously excellent composers out there, legends like Hans Zimmer and John Williams, but Ludwig is young and has a long career ahead of him. And the work he's doing is just, it's wild. I do want to talk about, as we talk about some of these more technical achievements, the centerpiece of the film has to be considered the Trinity test sequence, which is the first detonation of any atom bomb in the history of mankind. And that's really what this entire film builds up to. I will warn you, if you don't want to hear any spoilers about the movie, even though this is like an event in human history, it happened, like there's real footage. But I would just say, if you don't want to know anything or any further details about that sequence or particular scenes as it relates to the Trinity test sequence, duck out this conversation and finish out the rest later once you've seen the movie. But I do want to quickly talk about it because, as we've noted, this is not a big action movie. It's not a big science fiction movie like Chris Nolan is known for. He's known for his big action. He's done a ton of practical, huge set pieces. I mean, he blew up a 747 in Tenet. He flipped the truck and blew up a hospital in The Dark Knight. He found a way to make a real wormhole in Interstellar and create planets and new worlds. Like, he's just doing stuff on a practical level that most filmmakers wouldn't dare to do because of just how hard and difficult it is. And just the fact that we live in such a digital world and such a VFX heavy world. The man came out and said, as you noted earlier, that allegedly there are no VFX shots in the movie. And also that they did the entire Trinity test sequence practically. They didn't use VFX. Now, they didn't go in the middle of the New Mexico desert and blow up an atomic bomb. There's just no way they could have gotten away with that. And they still haven't necessarily revealed how they've done it. They're kind of being, sort of hesitant to reveal the secrets, which I'm kind of grateful for. I don't necessarily want to know the details. I don't necessarily want to have the curtain pulled back. I think some of the magic of the movie is not knowing how they made this huge explosion. But Hoyt van Hoytema, the cinematographer here, who also needs to be nominated. I mean, he's just He's the premier IMAX filmmaker.
Oh my God, he's nuts.
He's crazy. But he said that they created scientific experiments. They built aquariums with power in it. They dropped silver particles. They had molded metallic balloons, which were lit up from the inside. They did all these different things to pull off an explosion of this scale. And they also had the actors really out in the desert to make this a real thing. So I don't necessarily know if this is like technically like a miniature sequence, like if they were doing it at a miniature size and were able to make it look like it was of real scale, or if they figured out a way to make it less of an atomic size explosion, but to still trick the camera in a way that would make you feel the epic proportion of it. But what did you think about just this sequence? Because again, the entire movie leads up to that, just the building of Los Alamos in New Mexico, bringing in the thousands of people to construct this bomb. And just that portion really kind of at that 2 hour and 15-minute mark, it's like a 10-minute sequence where we just kind of get to witness just all of the machinations come to life. And you can see just the importance of that event. And I know some people were critical of it, feeling that it didn't necessarily match what they expected in their mind. But I don't know. For me, it totally worked. It was extraordinary when it happened on screen. What did you think about just that whole sequence?
Yeah, part of it was the ramp up too, right? Like I think we all entered the theater looking for the Trinity test sequence. At least if you know what's going on, you know, with the story and the story of Oppenheimer as a person in general. But man, what makes Nolan, I think, so great is his resolve to be the director who is always and constantly like, I have to do this practically. If I can get this done practically, it has to be done practically. And we talked lengths on this podcast about a lot of people not doing that anymore. A lot of people are like, soundstage VFX real quick. You know what I'm saying? They just get it done. But I think it was actually Van Hoytema who literally was like, is it him or Christopher Nolan? One of the two was literally like, as soon as you throw VFX on something, half the resolution is gone.
Yeah.
And they do not like that.
They're not going for that at all.
They are not going for that at all. So they did as much as they could practically. But like you said, they did do those miniature science experiments or whatever. And I do feel like they kept scaling it up and up until they could like, okay, they were like, oh, okay, we can shoot this one. Like, let's shoot this science experiment and then, blow it up in the ways in which they need to. But I just love that approach in general. And I wish more people in filmmaking approached it that way. Let's do practical until we can't, instead of, let's VFX it. Or we'll fix it later. Yeah. We'll fix that later. I love that approach so much, man. Because in the end, when you do get as practically as you can and you do need to fix something, nobody notices the fix because everything else around it is practical. Who cares what the fix is at that point? You know what I'm saying? And I think the Trinity test sequence is just such a good example of what you're looking for. Also, just in a Christopher Nolan film where you're like, where's the set piece? Where is this is very much and clearly the centerpiece of the film. And I don't know why other people didn't like it, but I felt it. You know what I'm saying? It took us a while to get there too. It wasn't like in the first hour of the movie, you know what I'm saying? Like, what's way down there? And so it was the anticipation and everything around it that was like, man, this is crazy. It is more than the practicality and explosion of it all. It's the feeling of it all. It's everything being conveyed on the screen. It's the nervousness you feel with the experiment too. I mean, I was panicking like if the damn thing had already happened. It's history already. It's already in the past. My ass is like, oh my God, what is it about to go down? Is humanity going to die after? You know what I'm saying? Like, I didn't know. I feel like I didn't know either, even though I really did. And so it's just really good, man. And shout out to them for real. For I think also not only just everything they had to put into it. Them having to. I remember them reading about them building aquariums that got power in it and ridiculous things. People were just doing ridiculous stuff, but I really do appreciate them for taking their time out, man, to make something like this, because this is when you said something earlier. He was like, yeah, it's Christopher Nolan feels like he had to make this movie. This is like, to me, the example. The Trinity test sequence is like, yep, it had to be Nolan, because who else was going to be like, this shit has to be practical? That's just Christopher Nolan thing to me. You know what I'm saying? That is what he is literally known for. And so they did their damn thing.
Yeah, I think to all those people who were disappointed, it felt like that they wanted to see I guess a more traditional explosion on a huge
Mm-hmm.
scale, and I would just say that you can see a regular explosion literally in any big budget blockbuster that you watch. You can pop in any movie and you can see an explosion. Hell, even in Christopher Nolan movies, he's already done his fair share of
Facts.
explosions. This
Mm-hmm.
is the explosion of mankind. Like this is the explosion that people reference and talk about. It is like a singular experience, the first ever detonation of an atomic weapon in human history. And so the fact that in this movie it felt much more abstract, I really, really enjoyed that because you focus more on the reactions of everybody that was there as opposed to the explosion itself. That's not to say that you don't
Mm-hmm.
see it, because you
Exactly.
do. They implement all of those filmmaking techniques into that sequence. And what I loved is the fact that it's completely silent, and that replicates what it would be like to witness an explosion of that size. You wouldn't get the fucking sound waves from the sound barrier for many, many seconds if you're that far away, because you have to be to maintain a safe distance. All of these people were miles and miles away from that explosion. And there are accounts where they said, like, I didn't hear any sound from it for 45 seconds. And I'd be damn sure that we were sitting in that movie watching the explosion in pure silence for about 45 seconds before we heard anything. And you just felt it go on and on and on. And you see the bright white heat of the light,
Mm-hmm.
just the blinding light. And then the color changes from the oranges to the purples to even like a hint of green. It's like, yo, this is scary. It's actually like monstrous how he's
Mm-hmm.
able to bring it to life. Like there are moments in this movie, even outside of that sequence, that feel like a horror movie. You know that sequence when the speech happens after the detonation. I mean, for
Yep.
a second there, where you start to kind of replicate again what an atomic explosion feels like, I was thinking like for a quick second, like Chris Nolan might have the most terrifying horror movie on his hands right now. Like, can we get 2 hours of this? He might be onto something here. I want to see Chris
High
Nolan direct
key.
a horror movie because that was
Mm-hmm.
frightening, and that
Yeah.
replicates that experience, and that's how you achieve just the pure power behind something of this size. And I just thought that the whole lead up to it, the actual execution of it, and then the after effects, seeing how Oppenheimer dealt with it on a psychological level, how they were starting to recreate that blinding white light, how you would see what a human body and a human corpse would look like due to the
Mm-hmm.
effects of an atomic bomb, how you would see people's skin peeling. It was, I mean, it was just like ridiculous how he was able to achieve that. It was really, really scary and really frightening stuff. And that's why, like, you didn't have to go to Hiroshima and Nagasaki to see those bombs dropped. Like he
Exactly.
communicated it and executed it on a level that was much more personal to Oppenheimer, but it also still never removed the importance and just the awe-inspiring power and destruction that a weapon like that would be capable of. And I thought that everything leading up to that moment and then everything we saw after was just beautifully executed. And
Mm-hmm.
again, he's the perfect filmmaker to achieve that type of stuff. Before we close out here, got to talk about Nolan. I mean, again, as I said, like the guy is a really singular filmmaker. Though I don't enjoy necessarily all of his more recent efforts, I will never,
Mm-hmm.
ever, ever cap and lie and say like those aren't some phenomenal achievements, because he can do things unlike really any other filmmaker. But the guy has amassed a really, really incredible filmography. I mean, there are Nolan loyalists out there. I think we've talked at one point in time off podcast, like how he feels like the people's filmmaker to a certain extent. Like even people who
Mm.
aren't cinephiles, who aren't like that into movies, they know Chris Nolan, they know his name, they know what a Nolan movie looks like and feels like. He very
Yeah.
much has a brand established. He very much works with the same type of typography across his movies. You know his booming scores, you know his sensibilities with nonlinear storytelling and to take stories that can feel small and intimate but blow them up on the grandest scale possible. I mean, where do you think he exists within just this modern landscape of filmmakers? We got a ton of filmmakers out right now, and we got a lot of people doing it at really high levels too. You know, you
Yeah, we
got
do.
folks that you mentioned like Denis Villeneuve, who come from the same generation. You got
Mm-hmm.
others, you know, who make smaller films but on just extraordinary levels, like a Wes Anderson. And then you got those up and comers who are just like making a lane for themselves and becoming our blockbuster filmmakers of tomorrow, like Jordan Peele. You know, but where do you think Nolan resides in all of this? Because he's not like a Scorsese or a Spielberg who come from a previous generation and or is
Right.
like a baked in legend. And he's not like new and up and coming. He's right at that point where he's still
Mm-hmm.
working actively, but he's obviously already achieved a certain level of fame and legendary status. And so, what are your thoughts just about where he is now, all the work that he's done, and you know, potentially even where the future might take him?
Yeah, I think you explained it pretty well. He does feel like he's just in that very interesting middle ground where he's like he's an uncle right now, right? He doesn't feel like necessarily like a godfather yet, like a Scorsese. You know what I'm saying? That's like a godfather right now. Spielberg is like a godfather. You can't touch those guys. But he does kind of exist in the realm with probably like a Quentin Tarantino. You know what I mean? Like, you know exactly what's happening where he is. David Fincher, you know what I'm saying? They all are in this class of what we know to be greatness, right? They're just not old enough yet and need a couple more movies in their tenure to be like, okay, now y'all are grandfathers. Now we can push y'all kind of into that moment, but you know they're going there. You know what I'm saying? When it's all said and done, you know they're going there. And that's exactly, I think, where Christopher Nolan fits. Not only that, he is, I love how he does feel different from everybody else, the upcomers, the middles, the godfathers. He has his own thing. He feels completely different than all of those filmmakers. And it's so interesting because Christopher Nolan will make a movie that's like, they're like both muted and colorful at the same time. I cannot explain it, but it is the craziest shit. You know what I'm saying? It's like, damn, this movie is beautiful, but it's not like I'm watching Guardians of the Galaxy. You know what I'm saying? It is still very much down to earth tones and again, the practicality of it all, bro. You know, just like, you know, James Cameron is probably underwater somewhere or doing something stupid. You know, Christopher Nolan is somewhere trying to use his hands. You know what I'm saying? Like, Christopher Nolan is somewhere building some stupid set that's going to look amazing when it's all said and done. And I love that because, like you said, you know what you're going to get a Christopher Nolan movie for the most part. But I love how he continues to try to shift, I think, the expectation of what comes next. You know, even those movies, I still haven't seen Dunkirk, bro. I ain't seen Dunkirk or Following. I still have not seen either one of those movies. But what I do know is that these movies are just, he's always trying to do something different. And I agree that without his previous films, Oppenheimer probably wouldn't be a thing. You know what I'm saying? And so it's I don't know, it's just really cool to see not only his previous works build upon themselves to get him to the current film he's on, but to know that, like, you know, whatever the next movie is going to be like, what stupid thing did he build this time? What crazy set did he come up with this time? And to be honest, there's a lot of directors that you can't say that. You can say you like their movies, right? You can say you enjoy their filmmaking, but you don't necessarily walk into the theater knowing you're going to get a brand new something. And Christopher Nolan, you know that something is a technical experience, something you've never seen. Even though you don't like Tenet, I'm sure you can respect Tenet for being a swing at what the fuck is going on. This movie is backwards. Niggas are doing crazy shit in the movie. You know what I'm saying? Like, at least he tried to do something else. And so it's like I don't know. It's a level of I guess inventiveness that Christopher Nolan has that I think he will always be in a lane of his own when it comes to some of those things that he does, man. And so that's where he exists.
He's the definition, the epitome of an event filmmaker. He's reached that status at this point to where whatever he does, whether it's taking on an IP that we all know or doing something completely original or examining a historical period in history, he makes it feel important and makes it feel like an event. I mean, how many people knew about Dunkirk? That's a real story. And he was able to take it and create this visceral, fast-paced, for him especially, 100-minute movie that doesn't really have any characterization. It's purely about the horrors of war and just the pure adrenaline and suspense and thrills and terror that exists with war. And then you come to Oppenheimer, another World War II historical period piece, examining a man and just traversing the course of his life and the challenges that he dealt with and the brilliance of who he is as a person, while also still examining the effects that it had on human history and making you feel just the pure weight and importance of that moment and how it's literally still affecting us to this day. And we live in a nuclear world that was created at the hands of all of these scientists back in the early 40s. And so he really doesn't do it like anybody else. And I think the closest person in comparison is somebody you already said. I think it would be a James Cameron who is only making like the biggest, most maximal movies possible. James Cameron doesn't roll out of bed to make something independent or art house or interesting or intimate. Like, he only wakes up to make the biggest fucking events possible. Yep. And Chris Nolan isn't quite on that level per se, but he's always going to make something for the most eyes possible, for the most people that can watch it possible, even if it doesn't on the surface feel like it'll appeal to you. When I first heard about Oppenheimer, I'm like, all right, now really, I was already skeptical of Nolan, for a while off of his previous movies. And I'm like, we're really doing a biopic now. And then all of a sudden he makes it feel epic. It feels like a summer blockbuster and it has no reason to feel that way. And then you come into the movie and you see like, Jesus Christ, he's swinging for a lot of stuff. He's trying to tackle a lot of ideas and get the most out of this story that he possibly can. So the guy is special. Last but not least, before we wrap up here, 12 movies. He has a really singular filmography. Where do you rank Oppenheimer in terms of the things that you've seen? Where would you place it on the list according to his other works?
Currently, this is a hard list, bro. Nolan, this nigga cold. Currently it's at my third spot. As much as we've talked up this film, time is a thing, right? Like it's still very fresh. I might need a little bit of time to go past before I really understand where it fits on my list. Dark Knight is the Dark Knight. You can't take that away from me. It is what it is. Also, one of my favorite movies I said before is Inception, bro. Something about that film is just crazy to me. The concept, the shit he was doing in that is also crazy. And Oppenheimer fits in that third spot. What fits in the fourth spot actually is The Prestige. I really fucking like The Prestige. Oh my God. He was doing something different on The Prestige. But that's where it lands right now, man. Out of 12 movies, Oppenheimer is in my third spot. The reason I say time is important, the way it feels right now, it could very well in a year or two, you know what I'm saying? I could watch and be like, damn, do I like this more than Inception? You know what I'm saying? But right now it doesn't exist like that. But what I will say, I do love how so different my top three are, man. The Dark Knight is a whole superhero grounded Batman movie. Inception is literally the heist movie in people's dreams. What? In Oppenheimer is a biopic. You know what I'm saying? It's like, what? This dude is so The Prestige is a magic movie. What are we doing? You know, I really love that about Christopher Nolan, man. But that's where it lands right now in the third spot.
Yeah, I don't have much to add. It's very similar for me. Third spot right now, right behind The Dark Knight and Inception. I do think that upon rewatches in the future, I think Oppenheimer will move up to second because it I can say right now it is a better movie than Inception. Like holistically, just objectively, I think it's a better movie. I just have a lot of love and adoration built up.
A lot of love.
A lot I mean, that's a 12, 13-year relationship at this point. So it's hard to separate myself from just the nostalgic first viewing of Inception and all the repeat viewings. But I think Oppenheimer is certainly a better film and a better constructed film and a better executed film pretty much on every level. And so I anticipate upon future rewatches, I'll have no problem moving it up to the second spot. Again, as I said, I think it's really the culmination of his life's work. I think everything that he's done from the Dark Knight trilogy to Inception to The Prestige to Insomnia to Dunkirk, I mean, all those works inform everything that he pulls off in Oppenheimer. And so it's really an incredible film, one of his best, one of the best of 2023. And I certainly think it's going to end up on many, many, many top 10 lists at the end of this year. But folks, with all of that out the way, those are all of our thoughts on Christopher Nolan's 12th feature film, Oppenheimer. If you've checked out the new movie, definitely hit us up and let us know what you think.